Why avoid war when victory comes so easily to humans? Thule and Zor-El were about to find out firsthand the shocking revelation of humanity's true military might. The dimly lit bar on the remote space station seemed to hiss and bubble with ominous energy, much like Thule's oddly fizzing drink. The Vorta diplomat's normally pristine appearance was disheveled as he sat across from his old friend and colleague Zor-El. Thule shook his head, a haggard expression on his face. "I never thought I'd say this, Zor-El, but I think we completely misjudged the humans." Zor-El's eyebrows raised in surprise. "The humans? You mean those primitive upstarts from the Sol system? How could they possibly change your mind?" Taking a long swig of his unsettling beverage, Thule leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "You remember the brutal Krellian conflict, the war that nearly brought our galaxy to its knees?" "Of course," Zor-El scoffed. "The Krellians were on the verge of conquering everything. But what do the humans have to do with it? They barely sent a token force to assist the allied galaxies." "That's what we were led to believe." Thule's eyes glinted with a newfound knowledge. "But I recently uncovered classified information that paints a very different picture. The truth is, without the humans' intervention, the Krellians would have succeeded in their conquest." Zor-El leaned back, a mix of disbelief and intrigue playing across his features. Impossible. How could the humans have had such an impact without anyone knowing? "It all centers around a human admiral named Robert Grant," Thule explained, his voice tinged with a mix of reverence and fear. "What he and his fleet accomplished, it defies belief. But if we don't heed the lessons of their victory, our own civilization may be the next to fall." As Thule began to recount the untold story, the weight of the revelation hung heavy in the air. The fate of their galaxy, and perhaps the universe itself, hinged on understanding the true nature of humanity's military prowess. And for Thule and Zor-El, that understanding was about to come at a shocking, world-shattering price. Zor-El's eyes widened in disbelief as Thule recounted the incredible tale of humanity's hidden military might. The flickering light of the bar cast an eerie glow on their faces, as if the very universe itself was listening in on this revelation. "The Krellians were unstoppable," Thule said, his voice low and grave. "Their ships darkened the skies of 1,000 worlds. The allied galaxies threw everything they had at them, but it was like trying to stop a supernova with a pebble." Zor-El shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around the scope of the conflict. "I heard rumors of the devastation, but I never imagined it was that bad." "It was worse," Thule said, his eyes haunted by the memories. "We were on the verge of total annihilation. That's when we turned to the humans, hoping for a miracle. And that's when Admiral Grant arrived with his fleet." Thule nodded, a glimmer of awe in his eyes. "I'll never forget the sight of those human ships dropping out of hyperspace. They were sleek, powerful, and bristling with weapons we had never seen before." "Yes," Thule said, taking another sip of his drink. "I was there when Admiral Grant gave the order to fire. The peacemakers lit up the void like 1,000 suns. Krellian ships were vaporized in an instant, their armor and shields useless against the onslaught." Zor-El's brow furrowed. "But if the humans had such advanced weapons, why didn't they use them to conquer the galaxy themselves? They could have ruled over us all." Thule leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "That's the thing about humans. They have the power to dominate, but they choose not to. Admiral Grant told me something that I'll never forget. He said, 'We humans have learned the hard way that war is a last resort. We fight only to protect, never to conquer.'" Zor-El was silent for a moment, contemplating the weight of those words. "I never thought I'd say this, but perhaps we've been wrong about the humans all along. Maybe their restraint is a sign of strength, not weakness." Thule nodded, a hint of a smile on his lips. The Krellians certainly learned that lesson the hard way. After the peacemakers decimated their fleet, the humans unveiled a whole arsenal of advanced weaponry. Shields that could absorb the energy of 1,000 nuclear bombs, fighters that could outmaneuver anything the Krellians threw at them, and even some kind of gravity weapon that could crush an entire battleship into the size of a grain of sand. Zor-El's jaw dropped. By the stars, How did the Krellians even stand a chance against that kind of firepower? Thul's expression turned grim. They didn't. The humans swept through their territory like a force of nature, obliterating every ship, every base, every stronghold they encountered. But even in victory, they showed mercy. They offered the Krellians a chance to surrender, to end the bloodshed and rebuild. Zor-El leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he pondered the implications of Thul's revelation. The idea that the humans had been hiding such advanced technology was both awe-inspiring and unnerving. "So what happened next?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "How did the humans turn the tide of the war?" Thul's expression turned somber, the weight of the memories heavy on his shoulders. "It was at the Battle of Krell Prime," he began, his voice low and steady. The Krellians had amassed their entire fleet around their homeworld, preparing for a final assault on the allied galaxies. Admiral Grant led the human fleet directly into the heart of the Krellian formation, taking heavy losses in the process. Zor-El leaned in closer, his eyes wide with anticipation. The very air seemed to crackle with tension as Thula continued. "They called it the Unity Beam," Thul said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a device that could link the minds of every soldier on the battlefield, allowing them to think and act as one. The humans used it to coordinate their attacks with perfect precision, anticipating the Krellians' every move." He shook his head, a look of awe on his face. It was like watching a choreographed dance of destruction. The human ships moved in perfect unison, their weapons firing with a level of accuracy that should have been impossible. The Krellians never stood a chance. Zor-El sat back in his chair, his mind reeling from the implications of what he had just heard. "That's incredible," he breathed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "But how did the humans develop such advanced technology without anyone knowing?" Zor-El nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in thought. "It's hard to believe that a species we once considered primitive could have hidden such power from the rest of the galaxy. It makes you wonder what other secrets they might be keeping." Zor-El shook his head in disbelief. "I can't even imagine what must have been going through the Krellian Emperor's mind in that moment. To be faced with the realization that your entire empire was on the brink of collapse, and then to be offered a chance at peace by the very people you had sought to conquer." Thul leaned forward, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was there when the Emperor's response came through. The entire bridge of Admiral Grant's flagship fell silent as his words echoed through the comm system." "What did he say?" Zor-El asked, his eyes wide with anticipation. Thul took a deep breath before continuing. "He said, 'Admiral Grant, I have spent my entire life believing that strength was the only path to power. But today you have shown me that true strength lies in compassion. On behalf of the Krellian Empire, I accept your offer of peace.'" Zor-El sat back in his chair, stunned by the revelation. "I never thought I'd see the day when the Krellians would lay down their arms. It's a testament to the power of the human spirit." Thul nodded, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "And to think we once dismissed them as a primitive backwater species. It seems that we have much to learn from the humans." Zor-El raised his glass in a toast. "To the humans and to the hope for a brighter future." As their glasses clinked together, Thule couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the events he had witnessed. The humans had not only saved the galaxy from the brink of destruction, but they had also shown that true power lay in the ability to forge peace, even in the darkest of times. "You know," Thul said, leaning back in his chair, "I can't help but wonder what other surprises the humans have in store for us. If they could bring the Krellians to their knees without firing a shot, imagine what else they might be capable of." Zor-El nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's a sobering thought. We've always assumed that we were the most advanced species in the galaxy, but it seems that we may have been wrong all along." Thul nods, his eyes gleaming with the memory of that historic moment. Admiral Grant's gesture was a masterstroke of diplomacy. By treating the Emperor as an equal, he showed that humans were not just powerful warriors, but also compassionate leaders. Zor-El leans forward, his voice tinged with awe. I can only imagine the Emperor's surprise when he stepped aboard that human flagship. to go from bitter enemies to honored guests in the span of a few hours. It must have been surreal. "Oh, it was," Thule confirms, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I was there when the Emperor first set foot on the ship. The look on his face when Admiral Grant greeted him with a handshake instead of a blaster. I'll never forget it." He takes another sip of his drink, savoring the memory. Admiral Grant gave the Emperor a personal tour of the ship, showing him everything from the bridge to the engine room. He introduced him to the crew, who treated him with the utmost respect, despite the fact that they had been fighting against his forces just days before. Zor-El shakes his head in wonder. "I can't even imagine the conversations they must have had. What do you say to someone who was once your mortal enemy?" Thule chuckles. Believe it or not, they found common ground. Admiral Grant and the Emperor bonded over their shared love of strategy games. They spent hours in the officers' mess, playing chess and discussing the finer points of military tactics. "It's a human game," Thule explains. "Two players, each with an army of pieces, trying to outmaneuver each other on a checkered board. Admiral Grant said it was a way to train the mind for battle, but also a way to find common ground with one's opponents." Zor-El nods slowly, a look of understanding dawning on his face. "I see, so by playing this game with the Emperor, Admiral Grant was showing him that they were not so different after all." "Exactly," Thule says, pointing a finger at his friend. "And it worked. By the end of the visit, the Emperor was so impressed by the humans' hospitality and respect that he not only signed the peace treaty, but also pledged to work with the allied galaxies to rebuild and restore order to the galaxy." He leans back in his chair, a look of satisfaction on his face. It was a turning point in the war, and a turning point in galactic history. The humans had shown us all that there was another way, a path to peace that didn't involve conquest or domination. Zor-El sits in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of Thule's words. "I never would have believed it if I hadn't heard it from you, Thule. The humans are truly a remarkable species." Thule nods, his expression turning thoughtful. "They are, and I think we have much to learn from them, not just about warfare and technology, but about diplomacy, compassion, and the power of finding common ground with those we once considered enemies." He raises his glass, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "To the humans and to the future of the galaxy." Zor-El raises his own glass, clinking it against Thule's. "To the humans," he echoes, a smile spreading across his face, "and to the hope of a brighter tomorrow." Zor-El leans forward, his eyes wide with astonishment. "The humans truly are remarkable, Thule. To not only bring an end to the most devastating war in our history, but to also have the foresight to establish a lasting peace. It's almost unbelievable." Thule nods, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I was there at the first meeting of the Galactic Peace Council, you know. I watched as Admiral Grant stood before the assembled delegates, his voice filled with a quiet conviction that seemed to resonate through the entire chamber." He pauses, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. "He spoke of the horrors of war, of the countless lives lost on both sides of the conflict, but he also spoke of hope, of the potential for a better future, if we could only learn to work together." Zor-El shakes his head in wonder. I can only imagine the impact his words must have had on the delegates. To hear such a message of unity from the very species that had just defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Thule chuckles softly. "Oh, there were plenty of skeptics at first. Some of the delegates were convinced that the humans were only interested in establishing their own dominance over the galaxy. But Admiral Grant and his team were patient. They listened to every concern, every objection, and they worked tirelessly to find common ground." He leans back in his chair, a faraway look in his eyes. "I remember one particularly heated debate between the Krellian delegate and the representative from the Vortax Consortium. They were arguing over the distribution of resources in a disputed star system, and it looked like the whole thing was about to fall apart." Zor-El raises an eyebrow. "What happened?" Thule grins. Admiral Grant stepped in. He proposed a compromise that satisfied both parties, and he did it with such diplomacy and grace that even the most stubborn delegates couldn't help but be impressed. It was at that moment I realized that the humans were more than just warriors. They were true leaders, capable of bringing people together in ways that no one else could. Zorel sits back in his chair, a look of newfound respect on his face. It's no wonder the council has been so successful then. With the humans at the helm, it seems like anything is possible. Thule nods, raising his glass in a toast. To the humans and to the future they've helped us build. As their glasses clink together, Zorel can't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. The galaxy had been through so much, had suffered so greatly, but with the humans as their guide, it seemed that anything was possible. You know, he says thoughtfully, I've always wondered what drives the humans to be so selfless, to put the needs of others before their own, even when they have every reason not to. Thule smiles, a knowing look in his eyes. That, my friend, is a story for another time. But suffice it to say, the humans have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And they take that responsibility very seriously indeed. Zorel sat back in his chair, his mind reeling from the implications of what Thule had just told him. The idea that the humans would willingly give away their most powerful weapons and technology was almost too much to comprehend. I have to admit, he said, shaking his head in disbelief, I never would have expected the humans to be so selfless, to not only end the war, but to ensure that no single race could become too powerful afterwards. It's almost too good to be true. Thule nodded, a knowing smile on his face. I had the same reaction when I first heard about it, but the more I learned about the humans, the more I realized that it was just their way. They have a saying on their homeworld, with great power comes great responsibility, and they take that responsibility very seriously. Zorel leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. So what exactly did they share with the other races? I mean, I know you mentioned the Peacemaker cannons and the Unity beam, but what about their other technologies? Thule took a sip of his drink before answering. Well, for starters, they shared their advanced medical technology. You know how the Krellians used to have a monopoly on the best medical treatments in the galaxy? Well, the humans changed all that. They developed cures for diseases that had plagued our people for generations, and they made sure that everyone had access to them, regardless of their race or status. Zorel's eyes widened in surprise. That's incredible. I had no idea the humans were so advanced in medicine. Thule chuckled. Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg. They also shared their knowledge of advanced propulsion systems, energy production, and even terraforming techniques. They sent their best scientists and engineers to work with other races, helping them develop their own innovations and infrastructure. Zorel sat back in his chair, a look of wonder on his face. It's almost hard to believe that a single species could be so advanced in so many different fields, and yet they chose to share that knowledge with everyone, even their former enemies. Thud nodded, a serious expression on his face. That's the thing about the humans. They understand that true peace and prosperity can only be achieved through cooperation and mutual understanding. By sharing their technology and knowledge, they're not just helping other races, they're building a foundation for a better future for all of us. Zorel was silent for a moment, contemplating the weight of Thule's words. You know, he said finally, I used to think that the humans were just another upstart race, trying to make a name for themselves in the galaxy. But now I see that they're so much more than that. They're not just warriors or diplomats, they're true visionaries. Thule raised his glass in a toast, a smile on his face. To the humans, he said, his voice filled with admiration. May their example inspire us all to be better than we are. As their glasses clinked together, Zorel couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. The galaxy had been through so much, had suffered so greatly, but with the humans leading the way, it seemed that anything was possible. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've always wondered what drives the humans to be so selfless, to put the needs of others before their own, even when they have every reason not to. Thule smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. That, my friend, is a story for another time, but suffice it to say, the humans have a saying, we're all in this together, and they truly believe it, with every fiber of their being. Zorel leans forward, his brow furrowed with concern. The Zorathi Emperor actually refused to negotiate, even in the face of the humans' overwhelming military superiority. Thule nods gravely. He did. The Emperor was convinced that the humans were bluffing, that they wouldn't dare use their advanced weapons against the Zorathi for fear of being seen as aggressors. But surely Admiral Grant didn't just accept that, Zor-El says, shaking his head in disbelief. Not after everything the humans had done to promote peace and cooperation in the galaxy. So of course not, Thule agrees, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Admiral Grant had a plan. He knew that the Zorathi respected strength above all else, so he decided to give them a demonstration of the humans' power. Thule leans back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. He challenged the Zorathi Emperor to a duel. A duel? Zor-El exclaims, nearly spilling his drink in surprise. You mean like a physical fight? Thule chuckles. Not quite. Admiral Grant proposed a duel of minds, a battle of wits and strategy. He invited the Emperor to play a game of chess with the fate of the human prisoners and the stolen resources hanging in the balance. Zor-El frowns, confused. Chess? Wasn't that the game you mentioned earlier, the one the humans used to bond with the Krellian Emperor? The very same, Thule confirms, nodding. But this time the stakes were much higher. If Admiral Grant won, the Zorathi would release the prisoners and return the stolen goods. If he lost, the humans would withdraw from Zorathi space and never return. That's a huge risk, Zor-El says, shaking his head in disbelief. What if the Emperor had been a master chess player? Zor-El leans forward, hanging on every word. So what happened? Did Admiral Grant win? Thule's smile widens. He did more than win. He absolutely decimated the Zorathi Emperor, beating him in just a handful of moves. The Emperor was so stunned by the defeat that he had no choice but to honor the terms of the agreement. Zor-El sits back in his chair, marveling at the story. Incredible. The humans really are full of surprises. Indeed they are, Thule agrees, his expression turning serious. But the chess match was just the beginning. What Admiral Grant did next was even more remarkable. Zor-El raises an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? Thule takes a sip of his drink before continuing. After the match, Admiral Grant met with the Zorathi Emperor in private. He could have gloated about his victory or made demands of the Zorathi, but instead, he did something entirely unexpected. What did he do? Zor-El asks, leaning forward in anticipation. Thule's expression softens, a touch of wonder in his voice. He offered to teach the Emperor how to play chess. Zor-El blinks in surprise. He what? Admiral Grant saw an opportunity to build a bridge between our two species, Thule explains, his voice filled with admiration. He knew that the Zorathi valued strength and strategy above all else, and he wanted to show them that those qualities could be found in more than just physical combat. And the Emperor accepted his offer, Zor-El asks, still trying to wrap his mind around the idea. He did, Thule confirms, nodding. Over the next few weeks, Admiral Grant and the Emperor met regularly to play chess and discuss strategy, and as they played, something remarkable began to happen. Zor-El raises an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? Thule smiles, a faraway look in his eyes. The Emperor began to see the humans in a new light. He realized that they weren't just a powerful military force, but a species with a deep respect for knowledge and learning. And he began to question some of the Zorathi's long-held beliefs about the value of conquest and domination. Zor-El shakes his head in disbelief. I never thought I'd see the day when a Zorathi Emperor would question the value of conquest. Neither did I, Thule admits, chuckling. But that's the power of the human spirit. They have a way of bringing out the best in others, even in those who seem the most resistant to change. Zor-El sits back in his chair, pondering the implications of Thule's words. It's remarkable, really. The humans have accomplished more in a few short years than most species do in centuries, and they've done it all without resorting to violence or coercion. Thad nods, a look of pride on his face. That's the human way. They believe that every species has the potential for greatness, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to help them realize that potential, even if it means risking their own lives and resources in the process. As their glasses clink together, Thule can't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. The galaxy had been through so much, had suffered so greatly, but with the humans as their guide, it seemed that anything was possible. "For you know," he says thoughtfully, "I've often wondered what drives the humans to be so selfless, to put the needs of others before their own, even when they have every reason not to." Zoriel nods, a look of curiosity on his face. "I've wondered the same thing. What is it about their species that sets them apart from the rest of us?" Zoriel's eyes widen in astonishment as Thule recounts the epic duel between Admiral Grant and the Zorathi Emperor. "Incredible," he breathes, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never would have thought a human could best a Zorathi warrior in single combat." Thule nods, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "It was a sight to behold, my friend. The Emperor was a master swordsman renowned throughout the galaxy for his skill and ferocity, but Admiral Grant matched him blow for blow, his energy blade flashing and humming as they clashed." Zoriel leans forward, engrossed in the tale. "How did he do it? I've seen Zorathi warriors in action, and they're like forces of nature." Thule takes a sip of his drink before continuing. Admiral Grant had studied Zorathi combat techniques extensively before the duel. He knew their strengths and weaknesses, and he used that knowledge to his advantage. He pauses for a moment, as if recalling the memory in vivid detail. There was one moment near the end of the duel where it looked like the Emperor had him. He'd knocked Admiral Grant's blade aside and was moving in for the kill. Zoriel holds his breath, hanging on every word. "But then," Thule says, a note of awe in his voice, "Admiral Grant did something unexpected. He deactivated his blade and dropped to the ground, rolling under the Emperor's swing. Before the Emperor could react, Admiral Grant was behind him. His blade reignited and pressed against the Emperor's throat." Zoriel exhales slowly, marveling at the human's ingenuity. A risky move, but it paid off. Thule nods. The Emperor had no choice but to yield, and true to his word he released the human prisoners and returned the stolen goods. Zoriel sits back in his chair, processing the incredible story. "I have to admit, Thule, I'm impressed. The humans continue to surprise me with their resourcefulness and courage." Zoriel raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, do tell." Thule leans forward, his voice lowering conspiratorially. After the duel, Admiral Grant requested a private audience with the Zorathi Emperor. He wanted to discuss the future of their two species and how they could work together to build a better galaxy. Zoriel's jaw drops. He wanted to negotiate with the Zorathi after everything they'd done. Thule nods. Admiral Grant believed that every species, no matter how brutal or ruthless, had the potential for change. He saw the duel not as a victory over an enemy, but as an opportunity to forge a new alliance. He takes another sip of his drink, savoring the memory. "And do you know what the most incredible part was? The Emperor agreed to the meeting. He was so impressed by Admiral Grant's skill and honor that he was willing to listen to what he had to say." Zoriel shakes his head in amazement. "Unbelievable. The humans never cease to amaze me." Thal chuckles softly. They have that effect on a lot of people, but what Admiral Grant accomplished in that meeting room was nothing short of miraculous. Through sheer force of will and diplomacy, he managed to convince the Emperor that there was a better way forward, one that didn't involve conquest or enslavement. Zoriel leans forward, hanging on every word. "And what was the outcome of that meeting?" Thule smiles, a glint of hope in his eyes. A new era of peace and cooperation between the humans and the Zorathi. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of challenges along the way, but Admiral Grant never gave up. He believed that every species had the right to live in freedom and dignity, and he was willing to fight for that belief, no matter the cost. Zoriel sits back in his chair, marveling at the incredible story. The humans truly are a remarkable species, Thule. Their compassion and dedication to justice are unmatched. Thule nods, raising his glass in a toast. "To the humans and to the future they've helped us build." As their glasses clink together, Zoriel can't help but feel a sense of hope for the galaxy. With the humans as their allies and guides, anything seemed possible. "You know," he says thoughtfully, "I've always wondered what drives the humans to be so selfless, to put the needs of others before their own, even when they have every reason not to. Thule smiles, a knowing look in his eyes. That, my friend, is a question that has puzzled many of us for a long time, but I think I may have found the answer. Zor-El leans forward, intrigued. Oh, do tell. Thule takes a deep breath, as if preparing to reveal a great secret. It all goes back to their history and the struggles they've faced as a species. You see, the humans haven't always been the enlightened, peaceful race we know today. He pauses for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. There was a time long ago when they were just as divided and violent as any other species in the galaxy. They fought wars among themselves, oppressed and enslaved each other, and nearly destroyed their own planet in the process. Zor-El's eyes widen in surprise. I had no idea. How did they overcome such darkness? Thule smiles, a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. Through great sacrifice and courage, there were always those among them who believed in a better way, who fought against the tide of hatred and ignorance, and slowly, over generations, they began to make progress. He leans back in his chair, his gaze distant as if seeing into the past. It wasn't easy, and there were many setbacks along the way, but the humans never gave up. They kept pushing forward, kept fighting for the ideals they believed in, even when it seemed hopeless. Zor-El nods slowly, understanding dawning on his face. And that's why they're so committed to helping other species, because they know firsthand the cost of war and oppression. Thule nods. Exactly. The humans have learned from their own mistakes, and they're determined not to let other species suffer the same fate. They believe that every sentient being has the right to live in peace and freedom, and they're willing to fight for that belief, no matter the cost. Zor-El sits back in his chair, marveling at the incredible story. I never knew the humans had such a complex and tragic history. It makes their achievements all the more remarkable. Thule raises his glass, a look of respect and admiration on his face. To the humans and to the lessons they've taught us all, may we never forget the price they paid for the peace we now enjoy. As their glasses clink together, Zor-El can't help but feel a sense of awe and gratitude for the incredible species that had changed the galaxy forever. The humans had shown them all that there was another way, a path to peace and unity that didn't involve conquest or domination. You know, he says thoughtfully, I think I understand now why the humans are so special. It's not just their technology or their military might, it's their spirit, their unwavering commitment to justice and compassion. Thule nods, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That's the essence of what makes them human, my friend, and it's a lesson we could all stand to learn. As they sit there in the dimly lit bar, sipping their drinks and pondering the incredible story of the humans, Zor-El can't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. With allies like the humans at their side, anything seemed possible. Tell me more, he says eagerly, leaning forward in his seat. I want to know everything about these remarkable humans and their journey to enlightenment. Thule chuckles softly, a glint of excitement in his eyes. Well, my friend, you're in for quite a tale. But first, let me refill our drinks. This is a story that deserves to be savored, one sip at a time. Zor-El stares at Thule in disbelief, his eyes wide with shock. Admiral Grant sacrificed himself to save the Zorathi Emperor. I can't believe it. After everything the Zorathi had done, he still chose to protect their leader. Thule nods solemnly, his gaze distant as he recalls the tragic event. It was a moment that shook the galaxy to its core. When news of Admiral Grant's death spread, there was an outpouring of grief and anger from every corner of the universe. He takes a deep breath, his voice heavy with emotion. The human extremists who had staged the attack were quickly apprehended and brought to justice. But the damage had been done. Many feared that Admiral Grant's death would reignite the conflict between our species. Zor-El leans forward, his brow furrowed with concern. But it didn't, did it? You said the Zorathi became advocates for peace. Thule smiles wistfully. Yes, they did. And it was all because of the Zorathi Emperor. In the days following the attack, he made a public address that was broadcast across the galaxy. He closes his eyes as if picturing the scene in his mind. The Emperor stood before a crowd of millions. his face etched with grief and determination. He spoke of Admiral Grant's bravery and selflessness, and of the debt that the Zorathi owed to him. Zoradal listens intently, hanging on every word. But what truly struck me, Thule continues, was what the Emperor said next. He told the crowd that Admiral Grant's sacrifice had shown him the true meaning of peace, that it wasn't about conquest or domination, but about understanding and compassion. Zoral shakes his head in amazement. I never thought I'd see the day when the Zorathi would become peacemakers. It's a testament to the power of Admiral Grant's legacy. Thule raises his glass, a solemn expression on his face. To Admiral Grant, may his sacrifice never be forgotten. Zoral raises his own glass, clinking it against Thule's. And to the humans, may their example continue to guide us all. As they sip their drinks in silence, Thule can't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. The road to peace was long and difficult, but with the humans as their guiding light, anything seemed possible. You know, he says softly, I often wonder what Admiral Grant would think if he could see us now, two old friends from different worlds sharing a drink and talking about peace. Zoral smiles, a glimmer of mirth in his eyes. He'd probably say we were a couple of old fools, but then he'd raise a glass and join us. Tholik chuckles, the sound echoing through the quiet bar. I have no doubt you're right, my friend, no doubt at all. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.